Buenos días, bienvenidos a todos y todas a
Good
este
morning. Welcome everyone to this conversation of the of the Tragic Project through its energy democratization team in regards to energy communities, community ownership of energy, while celebrating this day against climate change. I want to talk about which actions could help us contribute in mitigating climate change since we're going through the toughest climate situation. We need to work collectively as a human race. We still have time to prevent this global change from continuing to worsen. We have these strategies that we believe can contribute in this purpose. This strategy is democratizing energy. Specifically, we will be talking about energy, for example, to connect ourselves to a meeting like this one virtually, as well as energy to charge our electronic or electric devices, and, for example, what's happening specifically in the global north to charge your vehicles, your electric vehicles, thus reducing the impact and the emissions of fossil fuel energy. That's one of the reasons why climate change has accelerated drastically during the last years. I am Natalie Alexandra Diaz Cruz. I am the Latin America coordinator of TRAJECTS, and welcome everyone who is joining the dialogue of energy communities and community ownership of energy. We have several guests from Colombia, from South Africa, Germany, and the people at TRAJECT. I'm myself. I'm talking from the Institute of Environmental Studies at Universidad Nacional de Colombia, but we also have researchers in different cities around the country, as well as our colleagues joining from other parts of the globe, as I said, in Germany and South Africa. I'll introduce each one as we move on along the conversation. First of all, I would like to give the floor and introduce Ana Maria Ramirez. Hi, Ana Maria. How are you doing?
Bien, Natalie, muchas gracias por
I'm
invitarme.
doing great. Thank you for inviting me. Ana Maria is joining us from Cali. She is a PhD in sustainable regions and works at the Transactive Initiative for Transactive Energies in Colombia. This initiative is led by the School of Engineering at Universidad de Antioquia. Ana Maria, let's start talking and put people into context. Please tell us what are energy communities and what type of energy are these communities connected to? And also, what do these initiatives have to do with fair transitions based on your research and your years of training and experience in this field?
Bueno, las comunidades energéticas son una estrategia que permite involucrar
Energy communities
a todos los
is a
trabajadores
strategy
en
that
la energía, desde la
allows
generación,
all citizens to engage in the energy chain. We are used to just paying our bill, but we haven't been able to actively participate in the chain, as in generation distribution. It has just been the realm of big companies. This idea of energy communities seeks to facilitate the democratization of energy through mechanisms that allow people to participate so we can all play an active role. For example, you can create a community with the people around you with solar panels, but that's not the only one. For example, the initiative that we're going to look at with the women from Robles is born with biodigesters. It could also be done with small hydropower generators. It all depends on the context, but specifically, energy communities are a way to generate energy or power locally with the available resources and through which people, anyone, can be the owner of the system and participate in their administration, their management, and make decisions about the energy that is being consumed. And now, how is this related to fair transitions? Well, by opening or democratizing this power, not just paying for it, we are somehow able to correct those planning mistakes made in the past, where we just took it as it was. You couldn't just say, I want to have this, I want to connect myself this other way. It generates a concrete mechanism for people to participate. That's why this is related to fair transitions. The technical level drops, so conversations are easier. It becomes more open for everyone to understand and thus to engage and provide, propose even solutions. It's a way to understand that there are local solutions that can be implemented. It's impossible to have just one single means of transition globally. That's how the energy communities connect to this shift. Thank you, Ana Maria. We can continue talking about this relationship between energy communities and fair transitions throughout this dialogue. Perhaps with the questions that our audience asks us. You talked about the women from Robles, and you mentioned an experience born with biodigesters. We have Renata Moreno with the women from Robles who represent the community. Last year, they won the prize of the Energy Communities Challenge promoted by the Ministry of Energy and Mining. So since you mentioned them, Ana Maria, I would like to give the floor to them so they can tell us about their experience with energy communities. But first of all, we would like them to introduce themselves, where they come from. I know they are they're in Cali right now, but tell us where their community is. I know it's a rural area. And please tell us why you won this Energy Community Challenge. What was their initiative? And how has that evolved 1 year after? So Renata, thank you. Please open your microphone and let's hear from these women. One of them is Maria Cruz, Maria Diaz, and
tenemos como doble sonido. Yo creo que abre solo el del computador, porfa.
Listo, entonces toca que ellas se acerquen, cada vez que van a hablar. Ujú.
Y las
Buenos
vemos
días, muchas gracias por la invitación. Aquí,
muchísimas.
aquí entonces pues nos acompaña la Asociación Mujeres de Roble, que
We have the
imagínense, hablando de la energía,
Women of Roles Association.
pero como
They wanted to connect,
luz allá, a pesar de que es una
but
zona
every
interconectada.
time it rains,
Entonces,
the
claro,
power
ellas
goes
que
out.
pudieran participar en esta charla era muy bueno
So
porque desde
their
allá como
chances
vienen desde acá, Cali, pues nos
to be able to connect from
pues
their local community was very difficult. So that's why they traveled to Cali. That's
sí,
a little bit of context for you.
presentar.
Que por favor nos hablen fuerte para poderlas escuchar.
Sí, y que por favor cada uno diga su nombre, se presenten y nos cuenten desde dónde están, desde dónde viajaron, pues, para llegar a la Universidad Autónoma de Occidente.
Muy buenos días, mi nombre es María Rosa Díaz y hago
Good
parte de
morning.
la
My name is Maria Rosa Diaz. I'm part of the Women from Robles Association. Our place is called Valle de la Salud from the city of Jamundí, Robles in Jamundí Valle. Good morning. My name is Maria Caicedo. I come from Robles. I'm also part of the women from Robles and the Valle de la Salud Greenhouse. Milenci Peña. I'm also from Robles, Valle de la Salud.
Muchas gracias, Vivero de Robles, Valle de la Salud. ¿Por qué lo llaman Valle de la Salud?
What did you call it? Valle de la Salud or Valley of Health? It's a name that speaks a lot about us. We work with medicinal plants. So that's our motto. That's why we came up with that name. We care
¿Y qué
for
tiene
our
que
health,
ver
and that's what we're
desde
doing.
Roble a todos los
Right.
que nos están escuchando?
All right. And
Las huertas y las plantas medicinales.
what do these greenhouses and medicinal plants have to do with energy? Well, one of the priorities of the medicinal plant is that we were in need to solve some issues for irrigation to provide water to our plants. With the initiative and with the price, we were able to source a pump, electrical pump, to pump water from a well. Previously, we had to travel really far to get water. So thanks to this award, we got the solar panels, we received the pump and the well, and thank God we are no longer suffering at least that problem. And now plants can receive their daily water supply.
Bueno, ustedes mencionaron paneles solares, pero ese
You talked about
proyecto
solar panels,
que
but
ganaron el año pasado tenía que
the
ver
challenge that
directamente
you
con
won last
paneles
year,
solares o con
did it have to
biodigestor.
do with solar panels or with the biodigester?
En la presentación que hagamos te muestro el proceso que hemos hecho, que es con paneles solares y biodigestores en el territorio.
Shortly, I will show
Pero
you
en
the a
algunas
presentation,
personas les conviene más los paneles
but
y además van a poner unas máquinas para transformar las
as we have
placas
seen,
y entonces necesitan
they
energía eléctrica.
can do better with solar
Pues
panels,
necesitan energía eléctrica.
although
Entonces
they
pues
needed
necesitan. Pero
electricity
en el territorio
for the pump.
el proyecto que hemos hecho incluye los biodigestores.
¿Y cómo se enteraron ustedes del reto de
How
comunidades?
did you learn about the Energy Communities Challenge and why or how did you decide to participate?
Nos dimos cuenta por medio de la universidad y
We learned
principalmente
about the challenge from the university and from Renata herself. She told us about the project.
por medio de ellos fue que postulamos y pudimos pues
We applied and we won the challenge because they helped us a lot.
prácticamente no sabíamos nada.
we practically didn't know anything about it, and they helped us a lot. Thank God and thank them is why we have this greenhouse and we see the benefit of this power supply. So the relationship between community and academia does exist, and it's important. Yeah, sure, it has proven really beneficial for us. We didn't know many of these things, and we learned a lot.
Eso te iba a decir, que cosas que ustedes no sabían ahora también las saben gracias a las mujeres
Yeah,
rurales.
Pues no sé
and
si ustedes ven como un humito que pasa por
I
acá,
don't know if you're seeing some type of smoke
sirve mi
here.
difusor de aromas que
It's
contiene
my aroma
todas las
diffuser,
propiedades de las esencias naturales de las
and
plantas.
I loaded it with the essences of the plants that they have in the
Primero que todo
greenhouse, for
necesitas
example. So
hacer
we also learned
cursos
from them. It was
democratización energética.
a
¿Cuántas son
mutual
las mujeres en la
learning.
Asociación de Mujeres de Robles?
How many women, how many people
Somos
are there in the
¿cuántas mujeres que
association?
nos están hablando?
How many women are we
En
talking
este
about?
momento somos 6 que
We're
estamos
currently 6
ahora
women,
en el grupo. Pero pues esperamos que más adelante,
but
cuando el proyecto pues
hopefully,
empiece pues, a funcionar,
once the
que
project
haya las
is
máquinas
fully
para
commissioned
poder
and we have
procesar
the machines
el
to
aceite.
process
Porque
the
eso es
oil,
nosotros, el propósito de nosotros es sacar aceites. Entonces,
again,
más
our purpose
adelante
is
se
to
pueden
produce
organizar
oil.
más personas
So hopefully,
para que trabajen
in
con
the near
nosotros.
future, we can engage more people to work
Bueno,
with us.
eso sería ideal, ¿no? La idea también como que de estas iniciativas es que pues vayan
Yes, of
ampliándose las
course.
posibilidades para que
One
otras
of
personas
the
se integren
main
a parte
purposes is
y no
to
solo como consumidores, sino también
broaden
como
its
productores.
scope and to
Entonces,
engage more people.
les damos paso a que ustedes hagan su
All
presentación
right,
para que
so
puedan
the floor is yours.
organizar
You can make your
para
presentation
poder entender un poco mejor
so
toda
we
esta
can better
iniciativa
understand
que están desarrollando en la
um,
comunidad de
your
territorio en
initiative.
Jamundí.
Listo, ¿me dejas compartir pantalla, por favor?
Creo que ya tenías el permiso, ¿no? ¿No? Ah,
Compartir
espera,
pantalla. Listo. Creo que sí.
espera. ¿Sí lo tienes? ¿La opción?
Pues díganme
Sí,
ustedes si
es.
están viendo.
Perfecto. Ahí te estamos viendo, sí.
Ok. Bueno, vamos a hablarles un poquito las actividades que hemos hecho en la zona.
All right, let us tell you a little bit about some of the activities we've carried out. We are in the rural zone of Jamundí.
Eh, 2019 fue que empezamos, de
We
hecho,
arrived in 2019,
2018
2018 actually.
Porque no la ven ahí en la foto porque pues no estaba en la foto, pero ella pues inició también en este proyecto. Pues llegamos a la zona por invitación de una fundación de allá. La
We got
fundación
to this area by the invitation of a foundation in the area, the Fundación Funeco Robles. They asked us to join them and provide support to strengthen the traditional farming system.
zona rural de Jamundí. Recuerden que estamos ubicados en el Valle del Cauca.
Bear in mind that we're located in the department of Valle del Cauca. This department is mainly focused on agribusiness, especially sugarcane.
Donde hay todavía, que se encuentran todavía estas fincas tradicionales de comunidades
We still have these traditional farms of
muy importantes, pero
communities of African
por la
descent,
expansión de los monocultivos, de
but
la
they
urbanización,
are highly
y la
pressured by
fundación
the
pues
expansion
se
of
acerca a la universidad
monocrops.
buscando
So they
ese
approached the
ese
university
soporte
in
para
search of support for their projects.
ese sistema
The purpose
que
is
nos
to
parece muy importante a
prevent
nosotros
their
para
traditional system from
la
disappearing
seguridad
for the sake
para
of
la producción de
regional
alimentos,
sustainability
para la
and for
diversidad
producing
cultural
food as well as
y
cultural
biológica también.
diversity and biological diversity also.
Entonces nos enfocamos al inicio en trabajar con
At
5
first,
asociaciones
we focused on
productores,
working with 5
Palenque 5, Azoder,
associations,
Agroquifa,
Palenque 5, Asoder, Asoquifa,
encontramos en
and
la zona
Agrosurba.
también, pues además de estas fincas maravillosas
In
áreas
addition to these
protegidas,
wonderful farms that
eh,
almost were
unas,
about to become
sistemas
extinct, we found
agropecuarios de especies menores, pero con muchos
some
problemas de
minor species
problemas residuales, ¿no? Como en
farming
muchos
systems,
pueblos
but
de
they have
Colombia,
issues
pues las aguas
with the
residuales
wastewater
residuales
management.
van a dar a las fuentes
As we know, in most cases, wastewater ends up in streams and rivers. The water treatment plant uh, was was not working, so the water just flowed into streams, wetlands, thus harming fishing that also goes around in those water bodies. There's a tense relationship with the La Salvajina dam. Last Saturday, during a meeting, we were told the same thing. The power plant affects the water, affects crops, affects fish. This community is located downstream from La Salvajina. So they have been highly affected by these macro energy projects. And it's quite a paradox because they still don't have a constant power supply. The road doesn't have any lighting. It's really dark, very dangerous, despite being in the immediate surroundings of the hydroelectric plant. In addition to this, power is becoming quite expensive. Subsidies are being reduced. Gas is also becoming more expensive. So we started having these workshops with Ana Maria. And the purpose of these workshops is to tell people about the different power sources. We talked mainly about biodigesters and panels, and we also wanted to hear from the community about their energy needs and what they would be using it for in order to strengthen their own productive projects as well as their development initiatives. We had very interesting learnings, and we found a lot of opportunities to use local biomass for biogas. As you can see in the first picture, this is a wetland, as we have a lot of them in the area for traditional fishing that complements their people's diet. But these wetlands, these ponds, have been highly affected by eutropization, pollution with wastewater. There's a lot of cattle herding around. That it brings a lot of water plants growing, covering the water surface. The students that were engaged in the project carried out a study, and they found that combining these waters with macrophytes produces a very good type of gas that could be used as an environmental solution. We're associated and connected with the BioCol network. They have a lot of experience, and we set up some biodigesters with them. We found many opportunities for improvement. to take advantage of the local situations. Microfights need to be collected, transported, chopped. So it's a wide, or there's a big opportunity to receive and provide external support. The biodigesters too, they're a low cost technology, but it does require certain logistics. They need to be maintained, repaired, some details. Some of them have been installed and commissioned, but they have entailed a significant challenge, truth be told. We also installed some panels in some farms to power the irrigation. Some of them, like the one in the Robles community, is not connected to the grid, but some others are in a nearby farm. And even though these were a year ago, we're just now seeing a 20% reduction in the bill, while the expectation was 60%. So we have tried to get in touch with Celsia, the power operator, and talk to them, and because we have found several hindrances and we have needed to tweak the project a little bit. We also learned about the community use of energy. The other projects were focused on strengthening the traditional farms, but they were more individual, some specific farms, some specific producers. But for this project, they were the only ones that were associated, and they needed the energy, the power for collective use as an association. That's why we started this project with them, combining the new power sources, power plants, with their traditional knowledge. They produce medicinal plants through their knowledge, their ancestral knowledge. So this goes hand in hand. One of our purposes was to preserve this knowledge, in addition to creating economic opportunities for the women in the area. Now, so we also have the rural and energy transition opportunities and challenges for energy communities in Jamundí Valle. We have found associations of women interested in learning from their example. We work with another association in the area of Dinamayo. We have a association of recyclers who needed to power their crushing machines, their machines to process garbage. We also have aquaculture projects. They needed power to pump oxygen into the water. Another activity was for transforming cacao plants. They needed machines to process the plants and the grains. And they said, we can get the machines, but the money to pay the machines will drain the money of the project. So that was an issue. And we also have some new entrepreneurs with the chickens and swine in order to address the pollution of water sources. That's what we're doing right now. hand in hand with Biocol,
y tratando de entender también
and also trying to understand
pues, cuáles son esas
what
condiciones que
are
van a favorecer o
those
van a ser necesarias
conditions
para el establecimiento de del uso de
that
energías
could
renovables comunitarias, ¿no?
fight
Sobre
those
todo,
barriers for the
cómo
use of energy in certain
las
communities,
mujeres se apropian de las
specifically regarding
tecnologías.
how women embrace
Y
and
bueno,
take
ese es
appropriate
ese es el
technologies. That's our summary.
principal
Natalie,
y esta
thank
vez
you.
vamos a trabajar también no
Oh,
solamente
and
flores paneles, sino
we're
también
not
sobre las
only going to
ciudades.
work on
Leemos un
biodigesters,
en la
but
zona.
also gas plants.
Gracias a ti, Renata. Yo
Thank you very much, Renata. I owe you Renata Moreno's presentation. She's professor of the Autonomous University of Occidente. She's coordinator of investigative women for energy transformation, and she is also accompanying the Women's Association in this process. I would like to ask one of the women from the association, basically, what are the direct benefits that you have seen from the work that you have done when it comes to transforming energetic resources, and what are the challenges that you also face in the face of these community challenges?
El aprendizaje que nos ha dejado pues este
The
proyecto
lessons
es
of the project,
pues que no teníamos conocimiento de
we
ellos
didn't really have
y
any
que ha
knowledge of
sido
it,
beneficioso
and
para
it has
nosotros
truly
porque por
benefited
lo menos
us
allá no teníamos
because,
energía,
well,
me explicó mi
back then
compañera,
we didn't have electric power, as my
y
colleague stated.
que la gente en la comunidad
And
está muy contenta,
people
por
from
lo
the
menos hay
community
personas que
are very happy. At least
no
there are
saben
some
qué es
people
paneles solares y allá les explicamos y la
that did
gente
not know
está
about
súper
solar
enterada
panels, and
a
now
nivel
they know and they're super excited about it,
y los retos,
very enthusiastic.
qué dificultades
So what challenge-
a
what
cuáles dificultades se han
challenges
enfrentado, qué tan
have
fácil
you
o
confronted,
tan
and
difícil ha sido
how hard or how
superar
easy
esos
has it
retos,
been
cómo aprender
to
ustedes
overcome
mismos
such
tienen la capacidad
challenges, and what other maybe capacities do you have of solving these issues, or how much dependency on the university or external parties has there been in order to manage them? Would you say that the community is autonomous, and this initiative, does it have this possibility?
pues hasta ahora retos
Well, up until now, challenges,
hasta
we
ahora
haven't had
hemos
any.
tenido, ¿sí?
We haven't had any, and of course we have.
O sea, los
Well,
retos que hemos tenido principalmente
challenges that we have had,
¿cómo le digo? El
how can I
mantenimiento
say
de
this?
las plantas.
Are more about the
Primero,
maintenance
cuando no
of
teníamos
the
agua,
plants themselves.
o
Initially,
sea, había
we didn't have
problemas
water, right?
cómo
There were a lot of
agua
issues in
para
regard
poder regar
to
las
how to
plantas.
move about water,
Había
so
una punto
we
en el
could
pueblo, ¿cierto?
water the
Pero
plants, because there
aún
was an
así, o sea,
aqueduct,
quedamos
right?
sin
But
agua y nos toca que
we
salir
would
a
end up
recoger el
without
agua
water. It was wasted
para
too
poder
much.
mantener las
And
plantas
so it is that we would
viviendo.
maintain
Pero ahorita
our
hemos
crops
tenido
successfully. But now
sobre los
we
tanques,
have
¿cierto? Que por medio de ello vamos a
basically,
tener
like
cómo
the means of
sacar
this,
el agua del
we've
pozo para
understood
poder
how we
regar
can
las plantas.
remove
O sea, ya no tenemos
water
tanta
from the well
dificultad
without
pues
losing it.
como
We don't
antes.
have as much
O
difficulty
sea,
now as we used to.
es un reto
Basically,
¿cómo le digo?
it is a challenge. What can I say? It is
Que nos va, o sea, de beneficiar, nos va a
a
beneficiar.
challenge that has benefited us
También pues
in
hablando
this
de
way.
el
And
problema para constituirse como asociación de
También,
problems to have
que
associated
sí,
as
también tuvimos muchos
instituted.
problemas en
Yeah,
eso, después
we
los
had a lot of
asociamos.
issues with that as
Pero
well.
pues gracias a
But
Dios,
overall,
mucha
and
gente nos ayudó
thank God, we had a lot of help. And now we are associated. Now this is another challenge that has influence, and we have overcome it. Okay, now we look at something else. Basically, what we wanted to organize is an issue because there are numerous things that we don't have. It shall be organized better. We did that it depends so people can go and see how we work, and we have to work hard. There are no men that can help us out. We're only women. And so, well, further on, maybe further on down the road, things will be good, will be better, hopefully. But we hope that in the future as well, we can have men who help us as well. They can help us maybe cutting down crops with machetes or otherwise. And so there's no way in which we can all manage the tools. Really, no, we have to work together as a community, that everyone can feel like they belong, that they come together. And okay, to close the idea a bit and move on to one of our other participants, I would like to ask what the community challenge is exactly. Basically, who organizes it? Is it the ministry directly, or are there universities doing this? Briefly talk to us about what these structures are. Are there other committees from other territories that are doing this and that could be interested in applying to these initiatives and benefits in order to strengthen the projects on a community-based level? Yes, of course. Well, the challenge for those that have taken part is a challenge organized by the Ministry of Mining and Energy. And basically, when it came out, we were very happy because we saw that it was a proposal that could truly benefit all these energetic communities, and we hadn't heard it before when it came to the country's energy policies. However, we are a bit disappointed because once we left Bogota, we noticed that the challenge for next year was a different challenge. Basically, it seems that it didn't maintain itself, and so we do try to, of course, state that it was good to follow with the initial proposal because it's one of many examples, yes, but there are numerous things that can be done. There are numerous initiatives, and I mean, they are identified. So there are numerous committees working on this right now. It would be great for all this to be worked upon. As a matter of fact, the new minister is talking about energy committees. We're going to see if that does translate to specific support, legislative reform, and others that are required for these topics, as well as specific projects within the territory.
Sí. Bueno, pues muchas gracias, Renata.
Yes, agreed, and thank you very much, Renata.
Seguimos hablando de
We will continue to talk about this further on, and I would like to ask for Juanita to take the floor. She's also part of the investigators from Engineering School of Antioquia, specifically from Energy Investigation. And I'd love for you to clarify a term that we've discussed and mentioned briefly, but maybe it's not very clear. That's a bit of the audience, basically. What are the connected and interconnected or non-interconnected areas? And can you also please tell us what this process has been for other communities that you're accompanying us now in Cali, because we're moving from Medellin, specifically in the El Salvador neighborhood, that you can share some of your experience with this community, please. Thank you very much to all the women from the association. We will come back to you in a while, because there are some other questions that are left in the chat.
Bueno, buenos días. Mi nombre es
All right,
Juanita
well, good
Giraldo.
morning.
Como lo
My
dijo
name is Juanita
Natalie, soy
Giraldo.
investigadora del
I
grupo
am
Energía de la
investigator for the
Universidad EIA.
Energía group.
Bueno, sobre
well,
las
in regard to
comunidades, las zonas no interconectadas y el sistema interconectado
non-interconnected
nacional,
areas
en
from a
Colombia
national
tenemos
connectivity
una
system.
zona que
In Colombia,
mayoritariamente es
we
la
have
zona
an area
andina, donde
which is
tenemos
the
un
Andean
sistema
region,
interconectado
which is
de
connected
energía
and
en las principales ciudades, pues esa
it
energía
is connected with
se
the main
genera
cities.
en plantas
And so what it does is that
hidroeléctricas o
it
en granjas
generates
solares, se
hydroelectric plants
transmite y se distribuye
and it
hasta
transmits and distributes up until
hasta los puntos de consumo, pero tenemos
the
también
areas
otra
of consumption,
clasificación
but we
que se
also have
conoce
another
como las zonas no
classification known
interconectadas,
as the
que a
non-connected
pesar de que
areas,
pues no significa
which
que tengan o no energía, sino que están en lugares más alejados donde es más difícil la logística de llevar redes que conecten pues estas zonas que geográficamente están más alejadas. Entonces lo que hizo el gobierno para que les llegue energía a estos lugares es que crea redes eléctricas más pequeñas, más centralizadas, para que tengan el suministro de energía. Y esto, pues las dinámicas que hay en las zonas no interconectadas va a ser diferente a la que hay en las zonas del sistema interconectado nacional. Bueno, sobre...
Wow.
¿Vas a decir algo?
Understood. Thank you. Thank you for support. I hope that it's a lot clearer. And if not, then we can clarify it later. But now that you're going to tell us about the experience of El Salvador, you can maybe provide us an example by stating, okay, this is a community in which could be used for this method. So we can tend to it a bit more specific examples. And if so, if you have maybe images of what has been done in El Salvador, so that you can share them with us, we would really appreciate it.
Bueno, entonces el piloto que estamos desarrollando en el barrio Salvador, en Medellín, se está desarrollando en una zona urbana. Este piloto pues tiene la diferencia del piloto de Robles, pues, o del proyecto de Robles, que está conectado al sistema interconectado nacional. Entonces el sistema no tiene baterías o no se consume inmediatamente, sino que inyecta toda la energía que se genera a la red. Y lo que se busca es que esta venta de energía, el dinero por la venta de energía se distribuya entre los participantes. Bueno, que se distribuya entre los participantes. Entonces la dinámica pues es diferente, es un caso diferente al caso de Robles, porque no es en una zona rural y no está asociada pues como a un proceso productivo, sino que la energía se genera en los techos de los participantes y se inyecta completamente a la red de energía. Voy a buscar por aquí algunas imágenes. Ahí están viendo mi pantalla.
Want to confirm if you can see my screen, please? Yes.
Bueno.
This meeting is being recorded.
Les voy a mostrar aquí este video, por ejemplo. Se ve que pues están en todo el centro de Medellín.
Middle, or well, the downtown area of Medellín.
Ahí lo están viendo. Es que a veces tengo problema para reproducirlo. Listo. Bueno, entonces aquí ya empezamos a observar que dónde están instalados los paneles solares. Los paneles solares están instalados en una cuadra del barrio, en los techos de los participantes. En este piloto tenemos 24 familias que están participando del proyecto. Y pues en ese momento aún seguimos en los procesos de puesta en operación. Nos hemos enfrentado con barreras, con muchas barreras para el despliegue de estos modelos de comunidades energéticas en las zonas rurales debido a los procesos de legalización para que comiencen a funcionar los equipos de la generación, en este caso de energía solar, pero pues también nos ha traído muchos aprendizajes para determinar cuál debería ser el camino que facilite que estas comunidades puedan acceder y puedan agruparse para formar este tipo de, para crear este tipo de proyectos.
Bueno, no sé si de pronto Ana María también
So I don't know if maybe Ana Maria wants to tell us
ese asunto que acaban de
a
mencionar
bit more
ahorita
about
de la
what they're
legalización.
discussing
¿Cuál
in
es la
regards to the
dificultad
legislative
a
part. What is the
la normatividad
legal
actual
challenge in regard to
para
current
llevar a cabo
law in Colombia?
Bueno, eso tiene que ver con algo
Well,
que tú
that has
preguntabas
to do with something
en
that
la
you
intervención de
discussed
Juanito
at the
sobre qué
beginning of
eran
the
zonas
intervention
conectadas y
in
no
regard
conectadas.
to
Como él
what
nos
was
explicaba,
connected
en Colombia
and
el
what was
sistema
on and off grid.
energético
As you know,
eléctrico
in
tiene
Colombia, the
como
electric energy
regiones
system
muy grandes.
has
La primera es la que
two
está
huge regions.
interconectada
One is
con
the
una forma
on-grid
básica
one,
y sencilla de ver, es
which
la que tú ves con el cable
is
grande
simply
que
where
conecta
you see
varios
these
puntos
huge wires that
desde donde
connect
se
to
genera en
different
zonas
cities,
rurales
where we look
alejadas
at
a las
different rural
ciudades.
areas,
Y las no
the
interconectadas es
nearby
como
areas
aquellas
of the city, and non
están
or
muy
off-grid
lejos
areas that
de los
are
focos de densidad
very far away
poblacional, que son
from
las
the
generalmente
actual
ciudades grandes,
populace. These are
principalmente
normally
al sur del
isolated,
país y en
and they are
algunos
pretty
puntos
much the southern part of the country,
geográficos muy lejanos.
as they
Entonces, lo
have
que pasa es que
very
dentro
remote
del sistema
geographical
interconectado,
locations.
cuando
So
tú
with
te
this
pones un
on-grid
sistema de generación
system,
eléctrica con
when
paneles o
you
cualquier
have an
otro, tienes que cumplir una
electrical
serie
power
de
system set in place,
requerimientos para
be it solar
poder legalizar ese
power or
sistema.
not,
No puede
you have
ser
to have
algo
certain
de
requirements so
conocimiento
that it can
general.
be fully
Hay dos
legalized.
figuras
It is not just a
que
matter
son
of
súper
simply
pequeñas
hooking
escala.
everything up
La
and
primera
connecting it.
es
No,
el
no. For
autogenerador
example, we have to
y el
have a
segundo es el
self-generator,
generador
and
distribuido.
the
En
second
el
one
primero
is
está
a distributed
diseñado
generator.
para que tú
The first
hagas
one is
en una
designed
sola
so that
casa
you can do
y
it
tú puedes
in
consumir
a
parte
single
de la
home,
energía que
and so you can
generó
consume
y
part
el
of the
restante
energy
la
that was
entregas a
generated
la red. Y el generador
in regards
distribuido es
to
una figura
deliveries to the
donde tú
network.
puedes
And the
generar
other one
energía en
is where
varios
you want
puntos, que es
to
el modelo que
generate
nos explica
energy on
Juanita,
numerous
donde los
parts,
dueños
which
del
is what Juanita
sistema pueden ser
explained,
varias
in which
personas,
the
que es
owners
el
of the
objetivo
system
acá de los
can be
comunitarios,
numerous
y
people,
te
as
instalan los
you
techos,
see here,
pero la
and
venta
they
de
are
esa
installed
energía,
in roofs,
la
but the selling of
ganancia
that
se
energy
reparte
and
entre
the
los dueños
income
del sistema.
is spread
La
amongst
cuestión es
the
que
owners of the
desafortunadamente
system.
hasta el
The
momento no
thing
hay
is
una
that,
legalización
unfortunately,
que
and
favorece
as of now,
estos
there is
sistemas a
no
pequeña
legislation
escala
that
porque el
favors
procedimiento es
this on a
muy
small scale
extenso
because the procedure
y
is
es el mismo
very extensive.
procedimiento para un
As a matter of
generador
fact, it's the same
pequeño que son
procedure
20
for a
kilovatios,
small generator.
un sistema muy pequeño en comparación con
It
plantas de
is no
10
problem.
megavatios,
A
pero el
comparison,
procedimiento es exactamente el mismo. Entonces,
same
eso ha
progress here.
dificultado muchísimo el proceso. Además, ha sido el primer
But
generador, sería el
regardless, it has
primer
been
generador
the first
privado que
generator
va a entrar al país
that can be
y
distributed
nos hemos
within the
encontrado con
country.
una serie
And so we have
de
found a
instrucciones
series of
muy
fluctuations
incorrectas de acuerdo a lo que se
that
supone que
are
debería ser el
incorrect
procedimiento y cuando se hace
based
el
on
trámite con las
what the
respectivas
process should
entidades
be
nos hemos
when we
encontrado
look
con
at
que
what we do with
no
respect to
saben
bodies.
o bueno,
And what
no
we have
saben en
found
términos de que
is
no
that
es muy claro cómo
it is
recibir esa
not
información,
clear
cómo
in regard to how we
procesarla.
can
Las
receive this
visitas de los
information,
operadores
how we
se
can
demoran mucho
process,
tiempo.
and
Entonces,
that these
ya
visits can
llevamos,
take
bueno,
some
me
time.
podrá
So,
corregir en esto, más o menos un año
Juanita may correct me in this
en
regard.
este trámite y todavía no hemos podido
We've
entrar a
been working on
operar
this
el
for quite
sistema.
some time, and we
Esto
still
ha sido un
cannot
gran
work on a
problema
network.
porque
This has been a
cuando se
huge issue.
pretenda replicar estos modelos, pues
When we
realmente
try
yo creo
to
que le gusta a
replicate
la
these models,
gente
we're going to find
que
issues
hace una
in
inversión
which
para
the
poner paneles
people
o se inscribe en algún método de
are
financiamiento, pero pasa un
subscribed
año
to
y no está
some financial
generando
method,
energía
but a year passes by and
y ya está
there's no
pagando
energy being
muchísimo.
generated now.
Entonces, claro,
That
eso
is still
es
being paid for. And so,
completamente
of
un
course, this is going to
desafío si
be
se quiere
a
realmente
huge
promocionar las comunidades
challenge if we
energéticas
truly
en
want to
Colombia,
progress
pues va a
with
ser un
energy
desafío para que el
based
gobierno
communities
se
in Colombia. It's
actualice
going to be a
estos
challenge
esquemas.
for
De
the
otra
government
forma,
to
no va a
flexibilize
ser
these
posible
systems
realmente
with new
tener
norms
sistemas comunitarios
and making sure that
eficientes.
there are truly good systems set forth in place.
Claro, creo que ese sería entonces el primer reto, ¿no? Que a
Of course,
nivel
that would be the first
pues,
challenge then,
nacional y
right?
gubernamental,
Of
porque no
course, it would
podríamos
be both national and governmental because
empezar como
we could
a
not
continuar, porque ya
start
lo
to
utilizamos,
or
pero
continue
continuar
to
trabajando
work with
con
this. We continue
fortalecer las
and important to continue working on strengthening the different capacities amongst the local communities so that we can then overcome the legal barriers and so that those efforts are not just in vain. Well, I appreciate your insights and that you're sharing what is going on. I appreciate it quite a lot. We know that there have been some, for example, looking at the importance of this pilot program in order to generate these different electrical on-grid solutions throughout the country. And we also see that many of them also have to do with, well, other neighborhoods being jealous of the model that they have when it comes to communitary ownership in Medellin. Let's hope that it's not truly envious and instead it's seen more as part of an aspect that through common effort can continue growing. Janet, I would truly love to know and
Perdón, creo que
hear.
Renata tiene una pregunta.
I'm sorry, I think Renata has a question.
Ay, sí, porfa.
Oh,
Estamos
yes, please, go ahead.
interesadísimas aquí en lo que contaron, pero
Well,
queríamos saber, entonces,
we wanted
no
to
entendimos bien, ¿ya está
know,
generando algún
because
beneficio
we didn't understand part of the
nuevo
aspects
con
here.
los paneles
Basically, this
o
is a new beginning
todavía
for
nada? O sea, ¿ya se
the
le ha generado
neighborhood.
un ingreso
It's the first
monetario
time with solar
o
panels,
al menos
or,
reducción en las
well, and
tarifas
also, is there already a profit in
en
it?
las facturas de energía o cómo
Like,
es?
is there a
No,
reduction in the electrical bill, etc.? How
listo.
does this
Bueno,
influence the neighborhood?
como nos
Well,
comentaba Ana, hemos tenido
as Anna
varios
stated,
problemas
we've
pues
had
sí,
numerous
varias
issues
dificultades en
and
la puesta en operación de los
challenges
generadores
when it comes
distribuidos.
to
Como
having
este sistema está
generators set
conectado
forth.
pues a la red,
And since the system is
se tienen que
connected to
tener
the
unas
network,
autorizaciones
there
del,
have to
del
be
operador de
certain
red, pues quien
authorizations
es el dueño de,
in regard
de
of
los
course,
cables pues
the
y el
owners
sistema eléctrico.
of wiring
Y
the
en este
electrical
proceso
system.
de
And
legalización
in
pues,
this
de la instalación de
legalization
los paneles
process
solares para que
for the
comience a
installation of
operar,
solar panels,
hemos
for it to
tenido
continue
muchos
and
retrasos y
to start
muchos
commencing,
problemas
we've had
porque,
numerous
como lo
backlogs
comentaba
and
Ana, es
issues
el primer
because,
generador
as Anna
distribuido
stated,
que se
this is the
instala en el
first
país.
generator that
Entonces, quienes
is
son los
installed
encargados de
within
dar
the
las
country. And so
autorizaciones,
those
de
in
hacer las
charge
verificaciones,
of
pues
verifications,
nunca lo habían hecho.
well, they had
Entonces
never
tuvieron
done
que
something
hacer
like this.
muchas
And so
validaciones,
they had to do numerous
interpretar la
validations
norma
and to interpret
para
the
ver
norms.
cómo le iban a dar entrada a este generador
How
distribuido.
it truly works.
Todavía
At
estamos en
this
ese
distribution.
proceso
We're still
que
under this
llevamos
procedure.
casi un año
We've
solamente
been
en el
working on it for
proceso de
about a year now.
legalización para que el sistema comience a operar.
So that the system
Ya
can
vamos
start
en el último
operating.
paso, pues
We're
estamos
already on the
cerca
final
de
step
que nos
here. We
registren
are near
el
getting
sistema porque
full
ya
registration
cumplió
within the
todas
system
las,
as it
pues ya
already
cumplió todos los
compliant
requerimientos
with all
técnicos,
the
pues
technical
está
requirements.
aprobado para que comience a operar.
And
Simplemente
it
nos
is approved
falta
today. It
el
can
último
commence
registro
operation.
para
We're
que
missing the
empiece. Se
final
espera que
registration here.
sea pues
And
antes de que finalice el año.
it can
Y
be done
cuando ya comience a
before the
operar
end of the
es
year.
cuando se
And
va
once it commences operations,
cuando los usuarios van a empezar a percibir los
we'll see
beneficios de la
that
generación de energía.
beneficiaries start getting reductions in their electricity, for example. We see that for now, the lessons learned in regard to how we can organize these different communities and networks that have had the
Sí,
greatest
así es,
influence
pues
and
hemos
paid
tenido con ellos
fundamental
unos procesos, pues unos
We've had
talleres
numerous
donde les
procedures and
enseñamos todo el
workshops in
tema
which we show
de la generación de
regarding
energía, cuáles van a ser los beneficios, pues cuáles son los
what are
objetivos
the benefits, what are
del
the
proyecto,
objectives of the
que está
project
involucrado tanto la universidad
that are
como otras
involved, including
empresas,
the university as well as other
empresas públicas de
companies,
Medellín, que
be
es
it
pues el
private or
operador de
public
red
in Medellin.
pues una de las
And,
empresas más
well,
importantes
one of
en el
the most
sector
important companies within
energético,
the
y también
sector.
tenemos otras empresas
per se.
asociadas
We
con
also
las
have
que hemos
other
hecho
associated,
muchos talleres
have associated
y
different
hemos tenido un
workshops.
proceso con la
And we've had a
comunidad
different procedure within the community.
pues muy interesante sobre todo este tema de la
Has been
energía y de las
interesting.
comunidades
This
energéticas.
is when it comes to energy. Well, as you say, you learn by doing, huh? One of the fundamental parts that we see with these initiatives, both the one that is being led as well as the one that is being led by areas of el occidente, as well as rural communities. Specifically, we want to start with this pathway in order to go over what are the day-to-day challenges, to go over different areas such as norms and what must be adjusted so that it can become a reality. And in this regard, I think that the work that is being done is fundamental because without it, we could not really know what are the barriers and challenges that we have to overcome. We also, excuse me for interrupting, just one quick thing to provide an answer to the question that Renata gave us. Based on the experiences, especially with the models of distribution that we have been exploring for the last couple of weeks, it has regulatory and specific barriers. Is that the case? Ana Maria, you froze for a moment, but well, I wanted to state that I think you cut off.
Te perdemos un momentico.
We lost it for a moment. No. So yeah, it was lagging, but I apologize, it's the connection. So it was about Renata's question, right? Yes? Okay, well, I want to state that another benefit that we've seen here is that on a regulatory level, there are numerous debates that become aspects because there are numerous things that must be shown when we say it's difficult. What's difficult? Now, with the exercise that we've been doing in El Salvador, we are showing that not even with the support of different entities such as EPM, well, it's one of the most representative companies in the market in Colombia, and it provides us with technical and specialized assessment. It allows us to have generated sources in a year. And this helps us so that on a regulation level, we can work with the Ministry of Mining and Energy and say, okay, we have to do this. We have to work with concrete examples, which shall allow us to explain why it's not easy to do so. And it's not easy because there's not a diffusion of the topic and because there are no legal mechanisms that can ease in these strategies, which has not been heard. But again, this is a huge benefit for El Salvador when it comes to different energetic advancements in private in Colombia, because there could be intention involved, but it's not fundamentalized to sell a wonderful idea. But regardless, in the case of Colombia, it is difficult to take it forward. Thank you. And this is something that I wanted to mention to everyone, that from the democratic and energetic system in Colombia, we have been, especially led by the School of Engineering in Ethiopia, we've been documenting these workshops where to meet up with different parties and institutions to not be just from the institutional level. And we look at what these different principles are that rule over energy in the country, what truly is required on different levels in order to strengthen this topic and, of course, let it be taken forth. Now, last month, Ana Maria was leading some workshops at the ministry, and there's a third party involved, as well as a third meeting, which we shall have with a series of other participants that have been discussing what these different communities are, what they require, and of course, we expect that this conversation be, well, broader and that more people take part in it for those that are interested. When we look at how you can work together with your districts and regulation in regard to how this could be possible throughout the country. I would also like to give the floor to Janet, that is connected from Elcao. Janet Cherry is professor and investigator of the Nelson Mandela University in South Africa, and she has also supported and led different processes with communitary energy management in Cape City in Africa. And I would love for her to tell us a bit about what the experience is like in this regard. if it is similar in some regards to the initiatives that are taking place in Cape City right now, compared to what they have seen in Colombia, if they see similar challenges, and what are the maybe victories or benefits or possibilities that they see in which we can learn in Colombia in order to overcome our own challenges. So, Janet, thank you very much. It's a pleasure to have you here with us, talking about these different committees.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. And it's wonderful to be here. Thank you so much. You know, I was thinking, even though I'm working in a project right at the bottom of Africa in a different continent, and we're speaking different languages, actually we are speaking the same language. And when I listen to you and I listen to the mothers from the women from Roble, from your project, your cooperative, I can hear the same things as are being said in South Africa in many of our community energy projects and projects around the just transition from fossil fuel. It's a big debate at the moment, but putting into practice the alternative is really difficult. And I can hear that many of the challenges that you are having are very similar to the challenges that we are having. So I can also introduce Patrick Brennan, who's my colleague in this project. It's called Transition Township. And just to give you a little context, a township in South Africa is a working class area that was built for Black people in the apartheid era, in the time of apartheid. So it's a poor working class area, but it is a residential area in a city, which used to be segregated. So basically it's for poor Black people, small houses. We call them matchbox houses because they are all exactly the same, tiny houses, but there is infrastructure there. So it's not a slum, it's not a favela or something like that. It's got electricity, water, sewerage, proper houses, and people are poor. They are unemployed. They are looking for ways to generate income and access services, to access electricity. They have a small amount of electricity, but they can't afford it. There's energy poverty as well. So our project is looking at how to create community-owned renewable energy. And the principle really is to distribute ownership. And the understanding is that PV solar allows for distributed generation, i.e. it means you can decentralize generation of electricity, and that ordinary people, working people, can own the means of energy production. So what was being talked about earlier in terms of participation in the energy value chain, if you like, production, distribution of energy, that ordinary people can do this and they can own this themselves. So this is the project that we have. In this township, there are 25,000 households, and our pilot project, which is the only one we've got started, has got 25 households which are members of this. So it's what we call a neighborhood cooperative. And there is a piece of public land in the middle of these houses, which is called a gap tap, where they used to have a stand tap where people could collect water. And on that public land, those households have taken control over that land, and they have set up vegetable gardens, water capture systems with a solar pump, like you have a solar pump to irrigate the vegetable gardens, and also to have waste recycling to try and be part of a circular economy. And then, of course, the idea is to have an installation of not rooftop, but a standalone PV solar installation. And that is connected to the municipal grid. And the idea is that people can be small scale generators or independent power producers and feed that electricity into the grid and get paid for it. So they actually own those means of energy production and sell the electricity to the municipality. So the big problem in South Africa at the moment is that it's, as you know, it's a completely highly unequal society, and very, very small minority of people are the owners of the wealth in the society. And the majority of people are poor. And we are saying that energy is one way in which people can actually participate in production of electricity, which is desperately needed. South Africa is highly dependent on coal-fired power stations, on coal production. And it's just because we have coal resources. But in South Africa, there are also many minerals which can be used in renewable energy production, including batteries for PV solar, lithium batteries, and electric vehicle components, and green hydrogen components, and so on. So we are encouraging at a policy level the development of these new green industries. But what we're trying to test at a practical level is how working class communities can participate in this process. So that's basically the outline of the project. I don't know if you want me to share a screen just to show you an image of it. I don't want to give a whole presentation, but I can try and show you if I can share my screen. Shall I do that?
Yeah, you are allowed to do it. I guess you are allowed to do it, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry, I'm not quite getting that right.
Or if you would like to send me something by chat and I can share it as well.
I just can't find the screen that I want to share. Shall I send it to you? All right. And then maybe people can ask questions, or I can talk so long about other things. Ask Patrick to participate.
I have, but I'm going to switch to Spanish. Bueno, sí, cuando tú nos mencionas
Yes.
que la sociedad...
When you mention that the South African society is highly inequitative, unequal, this also happens in Colombia. Our society is highly unequal. And in broader terms, we also have many communities, specifically rural communities that are very poor and that have serious difficulties to access power, and as well as other priority utilities such as drinking water. And it not only happens in rural areas, also in urban areas, we have that problem. So I wanted to ask you, how feasible do you see these community-owned energy initiatives to reduce this inequality in the access to quality energy, in addition to improved conditions to provide a better quality of life? That's my first question. Secondly, you also mentioned the difficulties in this new green industry this industry of renewable resources. It is true, we cannot deny that in order to produce these panels and these new technologies, we still need to use and extract certain minerals in certain areas. So from your expert point of view, as well as based on the support that you have provided to local communities, and not only energy communities, but those who have depended on mining, how feasible do you think these energy communities can provide to mitigating climate change, given this situation of new minerals required for this transition? Those were like two broad questions, so we can continue discussing.
Yeah, thank you. So the question about quality of life, the situation is that in urban areas, most people have access to electricity, but they can't afford it. They can't pay for it. So government provides what they call free basic services, which is a small amount. But in addition to that, if people want to use more, they have to buy it. And that's the problem in the urban areas. It's poverty in terms of being able to afford electricity or other. If you don't have electricity, then you have to buy gas or paraffin. I mean, many people in rural areas or shack settlements use paraffin stoves for cooking. And it's also very dangerous. So electricity is the solution, and people need electricity. The question is the source of that electricity. So in rural areas, there are many rural areas where people are not connected to the electricity grid, which is highly centralized in South Africa. And we think there is a very real opportunity for renewable energy to provide a better quality of life for people. But in relation to mining affected communities, especially coal mining, but in South Africa, of course, we have platinum mining, gold mining, where conditions are really bad for the workers and the families of people in those communities. And in the coal mining communities, if they go through this transition from fossil fuel and close down the coal mines, the huge challenge there, of course, is what replaces that? What are the opportunities for putting into place some kind of sustainable development or alternative industry, which is going to provide people with incomes, but is also going to provide a cleaner environment and a healthier environment? And again, I mean, this is one of the opportunities of the energy transition, is to overcome the really bad practices which are the case in mining industry more generally. So it's a challenge for mining as a whole. I mean, even if we mine what they call green minerals, like the minerals that are used in these batteries and so on, the way in which that mining is done, the conditions of the workers there, the ways in which the mining is done such that it doesn't pollute the water supplies and so on. These are all very, very real challenges. I mean, they're opportunities, but they're also sources of great concern for us.
Janet, ¿hay algún tipo de comunidad energética que tú consideres?
Is there any type of energy community that you would believe is desirable to support above others? Perhaps because they generate less impact? For example, among an array of options for communities, is there any type of source that you believe would be more viable to support or strengthen communities in order to mitigate climate change?
Yeah, in our conditions, we think that decentralized or distributed PV solar is the most efficient and also the cleanest way. And it's also something which is able to be managed by communities. So we're looking at the model of having neighborhood cooperatives of people managing PV solar. And I think the question of biogas is also very useful in terms of providing fuel for cooking, because PV solar is not easily able to provide enough fuel for cooking for households, for household use. So I think some combination of PV solar and biogas is a good one.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Janet. No sé si finalmente tienes
Thank you very
imágenes.
much, Janet. I don't know if you finally managed to get sort your issue with the screen, so you can share. And meanwhile, this question that I just asked you, I would like also to ask it to George Heinemann and Ana Maria as well. Do you agree with Janet that these two sources are the most suitable ones to address these energy community processes in Colombia and depending on the cases in the global north? What are your takes on this?
No sé, Ana, si quieres compartirnos cuáles esas fuentes crees que son las más adecuadas también.
How about you, Ana?
Bueno,
I
yo creo que eso depende mucho del contexto
think
en
that
donde
depends a
uno
lot
esté,
on the
porque
context of the
posiblemente
community.
en ciudades va a ser mucho más
Surely
fácil tener
in cities,
energía
it would be
solar
easier to
por la
have
facilidad que
PV
tiene de instalación. Sin
given the
embargo,
ease
dependiendo
of
del
setup.
contexto rural donde se ubique
However,
una
depending on
construcción
the rural
energética, será
context,
más fácil una pequeña
for
central
some energy
hidroeléctrica.
community, it would be easier to
Ahora,
have a
no
small
podríamos
hydro power
discutir
plant.
bajo qué tecnología sea mejor,
We can't
siempre y
say
cuando
which
sean
technology
renovables,
is better as long as
por
it's
ejemplo,
renewable.
soluciones de biogás, pero
For example,
no creo
biogas
que
solutions.
se deba restringir o
But
priorizar
I don't
solamente
think
la
we
energía
should
solar,
restrict or
porque
prioritize
en Colombia
PV
tenemos un gran potencial
because we
hidroeléctrico
have a very
que
high
podría ser
hydroelectric potential,
inclusive más eficiente técnicamente sin generar
and it
impactos
could be
ambientales
more
considerables
technically
como
efficient
puede ser cualquier otra tecnología,
without entailing
mientras se mantengan
significant
en potencias
environmental
claramente ya cuando lo comparas con
effect
una gran central hidroeléctrica como
if
presa,
it
no tendría
remained
mucho sentido.
at a
El
small
PV
scale.
solar creo que puede ser una muy buena
I think at a
solución.
small scale,
Así
it
que
could be a very good solution.
sí,
So, for just
bueno,
like
hay
the
muchas
community aqueducts,
tecnologías. Yo creo
yeah,
que
there are many other
priorizar
technologies.
alguna comunidad
I think
respecto a otra me
regarding to
parecería
prioritizing
conservador, pero
one
si se
community
prioriza
above
una
the
en
other,
función al objetivo social que pueda llegar a
I
tener
think would be
y si
better
está
to,
ligado a un modelo productivo como el
or I
eje
think we should
reproductor
prioritize them
o
based
que
on
busquemos
their
elevar esa energía más que
on their
por la
project
fuente
or their
siempre y
purpose
cuando sea
rather than the
renovable.
source, as long as it's renewable.
Muchas gracias, Ana. Ya
Thank
vemos
you, Anna.
tus imágenes, Janet, por si quieres
We are
contextualizar.
seeing your screen, Janet, so you can go ahead.
Thanks. I'm just showing you this image of this is a little solar array,
Esta
and you can
imagen,
see
este es un pequeño
3 members of
despliegue
the
de paneles
cooperative,
solares y estos son los
and
miembros del
behind
proyecto.
them you can see the houses. This is the
Detrás de
typical
ellos
municipal
está
houses.
su casa, esta es una casa típica municipal.
Yeah, I won't show you the rest. I think I'll leave it at that.
No les
Thank
voy
you.
a mostrar el resto, era solamente para mostrarles esta imagen y cómo se
Creo que nos
acomoda.
falló la traducción en eso que nos compartiste, pero nos estabas diciendo que era uno de los modelos. Entonces, bueno, muchas gracias. Listo.
So thank you very much.
Para darte paso, justo después de estas dos preguntas finales que nos respondió Janet.
So George,
Tú que,
now
pues, desde tu formación como economista y también como
given your training as an
investigador
economist
del
as well as a researcher,
área de la
more
energía solar,
specifically regarding
también
solar
global,
power in
pues,
the global north
cuéntanos
and south,
o sea, ¿cómo ves el asunto de
how do you see this
trabajar con esta pobreza, con
issue of
estos
or this
aparentes
topic about working with these apparent extra costs that shifting from traditional to small community shifts entail. And also, what do you think would be the most profitable model from the financial aspect also, but also from the social environmental aspects in terms of energy communities?
Yeah, thank you, Natalie, and hello, everyone. Exciting to be here. Thanks again for inviting me. I'm actually followed a very interesting discussion, and I'm super happy to have received the information from the Robles, the women in Robles, also Janet's experience from South Africa. Regarding your questions, it's first, I would like to come back to the technology question Anna tried to answer, and I would also like to stress this. Yes, I mean, we shouldn't really say one technology is better than the other, or there's a technology which should be like really promoted. On the other hand, and also trying now to put a little bit the context of Colombia, the current context, the new government, the new minister of energy, the new plans. What I feel like, and that's the context in Colombia, is that there's a huge need. I mean, there is a huge need already about climate change and doing something about climate change. But here in Colombia, I feel like that there are a lot of things talked about, and we have a huge discussion going on how energy transition should work. And the government is now proposing like a new scheme, a new road plan. But and then even one of them is actually energy communities. So I'm feeling that we are having really start to think about practical guidelines, practical actions, how to really promote and put energy communities into action. And then closing the loop here is you have to really look at the technologies which can do it like on short term. I mean, I do agree that there's a lot of hydropower potential in Colombia. I do agree that there's a lot of wind power. But if you see on short-term feasibility, I think there is only the question of solar PV, especially if you look at the difficult situation of power supply in the coast. Second, about the profitability question, and that's really interesting actually, because there's of course a financial dimension and a social dimension. And if you think now also in this terms of what is really necessary right now to change, and you look at Colombia and the situation in Colombia, the exchange rate is exploding. People are still like suffering from the pandemic. There's a lot of social unrest, not on the streets, but I think under the surface, you really have to think about a social and financial feasible option. And I think what you see with energy communities here is that, I mean, we have a lot of pilots here, but I think what is mentioning in Colombia, but what is missing is that we really have to work on something which can be done right now. And I think there's a lot of talking. And when you see about the financial perspective, there are already methods. I mean, there are already banks who are lending money to renewable energy projects. And then you can ask yourself, and there are a lot of energy projects happening already, especially in the large-scale solar context. But then you're asking yourself, why is nothing happening on the energy community side? And there you have to really work on. You have like the regularity perspective. It is not clear what kind of legal setting you have to have for an energy communities. Energy communities don't know how they can get money if they apply themselves. So if a private person is applying for a loan, for example, it is very straightforward. But if it's an energy community, you really have to understand the scheme behind it, and it's not so straightforward. So that's the first point you really have to do, that you really have to say, okay, we need a community with 5 persons, we need such an amount of down payment, for example, and then you can apply for a loan to finance your renewable energy system. And I would go say, don't say a renewable energy system, I would say solar PV system, because this is feasible right now at the moment, if you think about 6 months to 12 months implementation. And I think that needs also the government now, because if the government is continuing like this at the moment, I think it will not be so easy for them to do anything in the next month. So they really have to do something now. So coming up with a scheme which is also then financially supporting them, and that would be the second suggestion, that you not only give them a legal framework to say, okay, maybe 5 households are needed to apply for a financial loan at a bank, or you have 10, and you create like a special vehicle or a special, let's say, community organization, which can actually be legally recognized, not only on the financial side, but also on the legal side. And then the second thing would be, of course, a financial support scheme, which can really push people into the perspective. And that is also my last point. I would really like to open up the discussion here, is if it should be profitable or not on a financial or social perspective. For communities, or let's say members of communities, profitability on a financial perspective is very important, because they will put their earnings, their savings into the scheme. And if they don't see a financial return short term, it will be very difficult to convince members to put money in the scheme. So I think we really have to discuss, if we want to accelerate energy communities in Colombia, how can you come up with a scheme which is financially feasible short term, and that people see the benefits. Because if you invest in a scheme with a 20-year power contract, and you tell them after 10 years you get the system, for example, you get the ownership of the system, and you will get actually the benefits in 10 years, it will not work, because people need money maybe next month or in 3 months if they invest their savings. So that is really something we have to think about here. And yeah, let me put back the word to you, Natalie, or to the other panelists to comment here.
Yeah. Gracias, Georg. ¿Quién tiene la responsabilidad entonces de capacitar a las
Thank you,
comunidades?
Georg. Then who is responsible to train or educate the communities on how to access or apply for these loans or this whole scheme to strengthen their communities? And secondly, we do need some starting capital for these initiatives. How feasible do you think? And we know that you have worked in Colombia. I don't know if you could broaden this to the global south. How feasible do you think to have a subsidy, an initial subsidy, in order to strengthen these communities? And how profitable do you think this subsidy would be for the government in order to achieve this transition?
Shall I respond briefly, maybe? Yeah. Thank you. I mean, it's well, I have to admit here that I'm coming from the private sector originally, and now I'm actually training to be an economist. But with financial capacity building, it's very simple. I think it's very straightforward, and we have seen it in Germany, which worked quite well. It's the financial sector. I mean, you have saving banks, commercial banks. In Germany, we have cooperative banks, and that's maybe the difference here in Colombia. But in Germany, it worked very well that the cooperative banks, that cooperatives were able to go to their banks, to their cooperative banks, and to get money. And there's an established mechanism to support cooperatives in Germany. I'm not too sure how it is here in Colombia with cooperatives and cooperative banks, but I haven't seen it yet so far in the context of renewable energy. So I would say the capacity building has to come from the experts, and who also have an interest in making it work, and that would be the financial sector, because in the moment there's money available. For example, if we talk about a special fund for energy communities, someone has to administrate it, someone has to give the loans, and they will earn some money for it, because otherwise they will not do it. And who will do it? Of course, the financial sector. The financial sector in Colombia is very has a lot of expertise. You see it. You have a lot of digitally or digitalization actually taking place in other parts of the sector. So I think it is very feasible to give it to the financial sector, this task, because they will have also an interest. If you have feasible financial models for energy communities, the banks, the commercial financial sector will be very interested to chip in and to do the work of training communities about the financial possibilities and also helping them to get the loans. But then, of course, you need a financial model, you need a feasible financial scheme. And there we definitely need, I think, the help from the government to some extent to see that energy communities can really kick off their activities and have an incentive to organize themselves. And that's, I think, the key here. They have to have an incentive to organize themselves. I think, of course, the electricity tariffs in Colombia are still increasing, and it's getting more and more expensive to support to foot your electricity bill. And of course the power situation, especially in the coast and in other rural areas, is difficult. But I don't see yet the incentive really to kickstart an energy community unless you have a subsidy scheme, unless you have like something where people say, let's do it together. If we do it, we will get a subsidy, or they will like finance ourselves a community center, or they have any incentive to do it, and then we will really have we will really see some traction, because that's also something you have to note, and that's just one last idea here from my experience from Germany, is that in Germany we had a very strong bottom-up trend, bottom-up will to engage with communities, to engage in electricity or in energy communities. Given the history of our Green Party movement, of our anti-nuclear power movement. And of course, you have an existing and an increasing environmental cautious society in Colombia, but I don't see it yet so much here. And the past is more like there were social conflicts in the country. You had a lot of other issues. So energy is a new factor here. And to put it really on the top of the list, not only of the government, because I think on the government it's already on the top of the list now, but also for the communities, you need to have them like really motivated. And that's something you can, of course, gain easily in short term with money. But of course, there are also other schemes. But there should be a smart scheme, of course, to not waste money, but to really put it into action.
Muchas gracias, Georg. Juanita, escuchando a Georg.
Thank you very much. Juanita, after hearing this, I have an inquiry. So where is the project in El Salvador being financed from? Basically, is it the community who's giving these funds in order to develop the project, or where are the funds coming from?
La financiación que nosotros tenemos en El Salvador
the funds that we have
no
at
es de
El
la
Salvador
comunidad. A la comunidad simplemente la motivamos a participar,
is the
pero lo
result
que se
of us
buscaba
inviting
era
the community
que crear,
to
pues
participate, but what we
simplemente
thought
hacer como el
was
experimento con
to
ellos.
simply do an experiment with them,
Fue una participación voluntaria y
to
toda la
have
financiación
voluntary
proviene
participation,
de
and of
un
the
fondo
funds come from
del Newton Fund y de la Real
the
Academia de
Newton
Ingeniería
funds,
de Reino Unido.
from
Tenemos una
the
alianza con ellos y
Real
también
Academy of Engineering of
de los
the UK.
aliados
We have a
participantes, en este
partnership with
caso
them,
EPM, ERCO y NEU,
and
pues que en el
we also
convenio
have
inicial ellos
initial
fueron, pues ellos
partnerships
son quienes
that
financian y
helped us
aportan
start up and
al proyecto.
finance the
Sin
project.
embargo, lo que se estaba
Regardless,
buscando en el proyecto que lidera
within
Ana,
the
y en el
project
que también
that
está
Anna
trabajando
is
Georg,
leading,
es
and
encontrar
in
una
which
manera
Georg is
en
also working
que
on as well,
podamos
we want to
diseñar un
seek a way in
modelo que
which
sea
we
atractivo
can
para las
show a model
comunidades
that will
y que ellos,
seem
pues,
very
eventualmente
good
cuando se
to
repliquen
different
no
communities, and
necesiten
eventually once it's replicated, that they
que las
don't,
cosas sean donadas o que sean financiadas
well,
por
that the
terceros, sino
incentive
que
enough
ellos
behind, or
puedan
that
acceder a formas de
that thing be
financiación
financed by
para
third parties, but that
desarrollar
it
sus
can
propios
sustain
proyectos.
itself so that they can develop their own projects. Thank you, Juanita. Now, the woman from the association would also like to ask you, how do you say the sustainability on the financial level for the community that you have But how do you see it in the future? Does it or would it allow for you to create and work with solar panels, or have you discussed this? What have you thought about it? What have you thought about the future of your community? Well, we have thought about that. Well, right now we have electricity and everything, but later on, how are we going to reacquire, let's say, the battery if we don't have resources? We don't have maintenance, neither for us nor to acquire the battery. So we're going to start over basically. And it's like 2 million, more or less. Yeah, we would be broke all over again. Okay, so basically here we see that these panels are not enough for a long-term sustainability. Or are they?
Les preguntaba, el proyecto del vivero de
And
ustedes,
also this project that you lead, does it somehow help improve the community, or are these resources being used to cover for other needs in the community? Well, right now, our project, how can I say this? In regard to sustainment, I'd say that, well, I can state that in my house, there's enough funds for this, something like that. No, as of right now, we don't have that much funds or that many funds because we're just starting. But our greatest wish is that the project be bigger, that it be more productive, that we start producing more. That is why we're going to acquire some machinery, and that machinery helps for the extraction of oil and different palms, so we can also extract everything from plants. And so I believe that, well, in the future, in a couple of years, so to speak, we can either have a resource for each family and household so that we can generate some income so that we can acquire the batteries, right? The idea is that we generate, so we can later have those resources. Thank you very much, Janet and Ana Maria. I would love for you to tell me, in the face of these difficulties, challenges, because the concept of energetic communities and all of the strategies are very recent, but how much, or no, why should we insist on these energy-based communities? Is it a bid that is truly worth it? Is it a bid that would truly allow for us to mitigate climate change, that would favor local communities, keeping in mind the current issues in regard to its function? I don't know if maybe Janet or Ana Maria would like to answer first. Is it truly worth it? And if so, why would it be worth strengthening these initiatives?
So I believe it is truly worth it, but it's not only worth it, it's absolutely essential, because we're addressing the two biggest problems of society at the same time. I mean, the first is climate change, which we have to respond to. We have to go through this transition to renewable energy. But we're also faced with societies which are desperately trying to move out of poverty, and where we need a redistributive economy. We need a different economic model, and we need a model where people can participate in that economy. So we see these as part of one process, and we have to go through both of those processes. So if they complement each other, it's the way forward for the whole of society.
Gracias, Janet. Ana.
Thank you very much, Janet. Anna? Yes, I agree with Janet in that regard. Committees become a tool that can potentialize transition, especially if they allow that from local areas can participate and provide solutions that will select centralized issues. However, I think there might be models developed that will financially allow for stability, because it will be very difficult to have a model that will be subsidized all the time. As a matter of fact, this is one of the issues that Colombia has with subsidized energy. It's the fact that it didn't manage to break or undo that potential, which is something that was discussed. Just because people have access to energy in cities doesn't mean that they can pay for it. And so this would be a similar system, just that with additional issues. And we have to know certain regulations. So it should definitely be a system that, in order to be proportionate, would have a financial end. I mean, I don't know up until where we can look at it, provide more information on it, if we can generate redistributions, or if we can maintain itself within the system due to its own management. Yes, thank you. Well, what you've just mentioned, it goes hand in hand with a question that comes from the audience that asks, so what fundamental elements are required so that we can make sure that the projects and energetic committees can progress and can have more benefits for communities that can be even more attractive for it to be done? I think maybe you can add on to this. Well, what I placed in the chat is that this is basically part of the project. Something that I want to tell Ricardo is that these different welfare payments that are used to subsidize for communities with low income, they could be used to finance these projects, that they can be autonomous, energetically speaking. That, well, I think it makes sense when Ana Maria says that these payments do not end energetic poverty, and so we must access it differently, even though it might be cut off because of a lack of funds. But we should keep it in mind. Well, this is part of an element that we have to look at.
Sorry, I couldn't
Yor,
get
can you
it.
hear me?
Yes, what was the question? I think there was a lack in translation.
Oh,
Sí, es la discusión
okay.
que estábamos teniendo
Yes.
también en el chat sobre
So it's what we were discussing in the chat. Basically, what reforms would have to be done so that these energy-based community regulations could go through and we could truly see a transformation on a social level.
You mean, okay, so that you mean the basic, yeah, I was just thinking about something which is actually more practical in a sense on a daily basis. I think what could be really interesting is, I mean, and that's something which is happening already quite a lot here in Colombia, that you have a lot of digitalization in place. You have many apps. People really love to earn points, like what are they called? These kind of customer redemption points, or that you really have to think about new motivation schemes. And I think that's something which is coming not only from sub-channeling subsidies from one point to the other and trying to come up with a new subsidy scheme, is that you have to motivate people on a daily basis to use renewable energies and to incentivize them to think about it. So one idea would be, if there's an app or something, a government app, where you can really collect points saying, okay, now I'm using solar energy, my community is using solar energy, which then can actually create like a track record for the users, for the energy community, and then they are getting more and more incentives, or like say subsidies. How could this work in practice? Is that you, for example, if you think about energy communities and their energy consumption, the first thing would be to create a load profile, which is actually, for example, using can-use solar PV. And what means can-use solar PV is that you're using your electricity, you're spending electricity during the day and not during the night. So a way to say, okay, look, our energy community is actually changing the electricity patterns, and we are like consuming electricity during the day. And then even we are having a solar panel now, we can like spend 10% of this already, of this electricity consumption with our solar panel. Then you would create kind of not only transparency, but also motivation to increase your share of electricity during the day, 50% of solar consumption or 80%. And that would be another, I think, idea which you could try to think of in broader schemes, that you really create an app by the government to say, okay, communities, if you really like to become part of our support scheme, sign up here and collect your data about your electricity consumption, and together we can improve your electricity consumption, your electricity spendings towards a more sustainable and renewable profile. Just one idea, but I think what is really needed is that we have to transfer all these things you have already here in place, collecting points at the supermarket, collecting points when you're buying fuel, that you really collect points for your electricity bill, and then you can leverage towards a subsidy. Yeah.
Gracias. Peor, Juanita.
Thank you very, very much, George.
Bueno, ya esa idea que dice George me parece súper interesante, pero desde el lado, pues teniendo como otro punto de vista, desde la experiencia que hemos tenido en el barrio El Salvador, siento que algo principal para habilitar a las comunidades energéticas es que la regulación sea más fácil, o sea, sea más fácil que una comunidad pueda por sí misma hacer los test y hacer todo lo asociado a la implementación de una comunidad energética, pues sin necesidad de tantos intermediarios. Lo que hemos visto en El Salvador es que llevamos casi un año con el operador de red EDPM, como ahorita lo mencionaba Ana, pues que nos dan una asesoría técnica y pues que realmente las solicitudes y los permisos se hacen dentro de la misma empresa, lo que se supone debería facilitar el trámite, y aún así ha sido complicado. Entonces pienso que sí es necesario que las comunidades se agrupen, pues y que tengan que pues se formalicen, pero que estos procesos para que se consoliden en una comunidad energética pues deben ser más sencillos y al alcance de que una comunidad con una asesoría técnica básica lo pueda desarrollar por sí misma.
In order to be able to do it with some basic advisory, and that'll be it. Yes, at our Center for Fair Transitions, we believe that a key element in this transition is to bring knowledge and possibilities, either financial, technical, environmental, bring them closer to the citizens so they can feel more connected to the solutions. We need to get rid of that dependence that only institutions or ministries or governments have the knowledge and the ability to solve our problems. We want to shift towards the idea that communities can do it at a smaller scale because they can be able to undertake initiatives and learn. In the chat, we were talking about why communities can assist in controlling climate change. Well, because the shift is already happening, but we're doing it in probably not the exactly right way. When we talk about these wind farms with huge, vast land areas that are not longer used for agriculture or preservation or ecosystem regulation, because they're being used for these clean energy facilities. And if we continue doing so, we now are going to be sacrificing huge areas of land for these technologies. If we manage to have these technologies in smaller areas at the local level, on the roofs of existing buildings that have already been transformed instead of creating new ones, we will somehow be potentiating these changes as opposed to creating new facilities that might also add to environmental issues. So adapted and downscaled solutions can help us achieve a better mitigation. So that was the purpose of this conversation, to take a look at what was going on regarding the concept of energy communities and regulations, what is in place and what is still needed for these communities to become even more empowered. I also wanted to take a look at what was going on in South Africa, in Germany, and Colombia, and what can we learn from each other's experience in order to contribute to this search to mitigate climate change. I want to thank everyone who participated in this dialogue. I want to thank the women from Robles, our researchers Renata, Ana, Juanita, George, Professor Janet, and you're all invited to follow all the events of the center, as well as the initiatives carried out by the different academic communities and the institutions that each one of us represents. So thank you very much, everyone, and hopefully we can continue constructing communities. Thank you.
Muchas gracias.
Thank you.
Gracias.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bueno, yo